Hey, woohoo! It's Adina from the First United Methodist Church. I'm the student director there at the church. And as I've said before, I've done a series of lessons in the past for my youth on the Stations of the Cross. And I thought maybe over this time period of this week, each night I'd share just a little bit of those lessons with you. If you like history, you like archaeological evidence supporting the truth of the scriptures, you tune in. You might learn something you didn't already know. So tonight I'm going to be using my chronological Bible. I like to use it for Easter and Christmas. I also have several commentaries and different resources that I've used for these particular type of lessons. As I always tell my kids, don't trust what I tell you. Don't trust everything that I've learned. Check it out for yourself. Get out your commentaries. Do some research. Find out the truths of any of this yourself. And if you know I'm contradicting something that you don't completely believe in, that's okay. Because a lot of this is really people's opinions and interpretations of the Bible, but a lot of it also is the historical historical significance of the stories of the Bible and the references going back to the Jewish cultures and things. So I find it interesting. I hope you will too. So I'm going to start tonight with Jesus praying in the Bible. And so he has already had the Last Supper with his disciples, and he has prayed for them. And so he has gone to the garden with them to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples are with him, and he leaves them at one point and says, I'm going to move on ahead. I want you to wait here and pray. I want you to pray that you resist temptation. And he takes 3 of them with him, one of them being John, and he goes a little further down the road, and then he asks them to stay right here. I'm going to go on and pray. And so he moves on, and he says to his disciples there, the 3 that he took with him, he said, listen, I am grieving so much. My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Can you imagine being so sad? So sad. Your sorrow is so great that it feels like you are just in a death of doom, of sorrow. And he tells them this. He's being honest with his closest friends. And he's sharing with them his grief and the way he is feeling. And then it says he goes on and he prays, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me, but nevertheless, it is your will, not mine. All right? And then he comes back and he finds his disciples sleeping, and he says specifically to Peter, it says in Matthew, what? You couldn't watch me even for an hour? He basically scolds him, right? You couldn't watch for me? I've told you, they're coming. This is not a good thing. You need to be watching, right? And he scolds him. And he goes back again and says, Lord, if this cup cannot pass from me, then it's your will. And he comes back and finds him sleeping again 3 times. And on the 3rd time he says, rise, let us be going. But here's what I want to mention to you. In the book of Luke, it says that while he was praying, an angel appeared to him from heaven and strengthened him. He was grieving to the point of death. He was weak. And the angel came and strengthened him. But it didn't take away his agony. It didn't take away his sorrow. He was still in sorrow, and he still was praying earnestly. And Luke tells us that his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground. Now this is interesting, right? Because they don't have a medical big book of things, right? They don't have the knowledge that we have now. But we do know that there is a medical condition. This is it. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I wrote it down for you. And this medical condition is very, very rare. But there have been many, many cases referenced to this in which people actually sweat like droplets of blood under great distress, under great anxiety. And blood coming from the pores of their skin without having been cut. So I think that's a wonderful illusion for us to kind of embrace just how great in depth his sorrow was at this time and how earnestly he was praying at this time. So then I'm going to move on to the arrest. And he says, okay, rise to his disciples. My betrayer is at hand. The time has come. Let's move on. right? And at this point, he isn't even scolding them. He's almost accepted the fact that they have fallen asleep on him. So then I want to read from John, and it says, chapter 18, when Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples, and this one says where there was a garden, and they entered, and Judas, who betrayed him, also knew of the place, and he met them there. And it says that Judas came with a detachment of troops, or with a multitude of men. Now I want you to imagine a multitude of men, or some translations I believe even use the word cohort. That isn't just a small amount. This is anywhere from 200 to 400 men. Now we know that Pontius Pilate had about 300 or 3,000, I believe, soldiers at his disposal. So imagine 200 to 400 of them have been given to the scribes and to the Pharisees, to the high priest and to his servant, and Judas, of course, is with them, to come and arrest Jesus, all right? So they have come, 200 to 400 of them, with torches, with lanterns, with swords, and with clubs. They have come and prepared for a fight, right? And yet we know that only 2 of the disciples there had swords. There were only 2 that could even defend themselves. And yet these men were all very well armed and ready to fight. And so then Jesus says to them, he says, who are you seeking? Now, in this particular John, in this book of John, he doesn't speak about Judas kissing him and identifying him. Other ones do. Other gospels say that Judas approached Jesus and kissed him and called him friend, called him rabbi as a teacher, that he still didn't quite understand who he was. But in John, it doesn't mention that part, but it does say that he approached them and said, who is it that you're seeking? And Jesus, they answered, they said, we're seeking Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said, I am he. It says, then Judas, who betrayed him, stood with them. And he said to them, again, probably looking at Judas, I'm thinking, I am he, right? He steps away from his disciples and approaches them so that he is protecting his disciples. He's setting himself apart from his disciples. He doesn't want the disciples to be involved in this. And he wants them to not be in fear of the disciples. He approaches them singularly by himself, right? And he says, listen, you've already said twice, you're not looking for them, you're looking for me. So leave them alone. You're looking for me, I am here I am. He's protecting, he is being the shepherd over his sheep, even right then and there. In fact, later on, he says, all right, I am here, let them be, let them go. That's the kind of man Jesus was. And so, he says, I am here. Now, here's what I want to point out to you. There are 2 miracles that happen here in the garden that are very easy to overlook. And in John, it says, I am he, and it says they, meaning those who came to arrest him, right? Those 200 to 400 people. They drew back and fell to the ground. Isn't that kind of cool? When you imagine Jesus is standing there and he says, I am he. And then they fall back and fall to the ground. I mean, I just think that's incredible. All of a sudden, these men have just dropped to the ground, right? With the standing in front of the glorious Christ, right there, the powerful man himself, all right? So then, it says he asked him again, whom are you seeking? Now, I imagine Jesus standing over them, laying on the ground, right? Who is it you're seeking? You know? And they say again, whoever it is he's speaking to, Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I've told you I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these others go on their way, that the saying may be fulfilled, which he spoke, of those that you gave me, I have lost none. So he's saying to God, listen, you gave me them to shepherd, and I've lost none of them. Just as God had told him to take care of the sheep, and the shepherd did. He lost none of them. So then I want to bring to you the second miracle of here at the garden, all right? So I'm going to read here, let's see, I'm going to read, what happened next, right? Okay, so then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. And the servant's name was, I don't know if that's Malchus. I don't know, but maybe some of you do. So he struck his ear. Now, some suspect that he was trying to actually slice his throat. What I want to bring out to you, or point out to you, is that this is not a sword in the way that we think of swords. Roman soldiers had swords, which might have been anywhere from 12 to 16 inches and weighed anywhere from 7 to 8 pounds. They were large, they were bulky, they were heavy, and they were very, very destructive. They could go right through a helmet, right through the shield. Very, very destructive. What Peter was carrying probably was a very small knife. All right, he would not have been carrying around a big sword in his cloak. For one, they just wouldn't have let them do that under the Roman authority. But two, it would have been too bulky for him to just be carrying every day. And there's a lot of people who have checked into this, and there are names that they've assigned to these type of knives. There are pictures. So do some Google research out there, and you can see the kind of pictures that they would use. They say that the knife, though, would have probably been anywhere from 4 to 6 inches and weighed 1.5 pounds, and then it would have been as sharp as a razor. So it cut off this high priest servant, or some say slave, cut his ear off. So here's where we see the second miracle, right? So Jesus says, put your sword into your sling. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me? And then we know he laid his hand upon the ear and healed it. The second miracle. Now, I don't know about you, but if I were this guy and somebody had sliced off my ear, I mean, he didn't just cut it. It says he cut it off, okay? So I'm thinking, what's it doing? Hanging here, on his shoulder? Did Jesus have to pick it up off the ground? I don't know. But at some point, he held it to his head and healed it. He restored it completely. Now, if those men at that point did not realize that he was the Son of God, I don't get it. I just don't. How could you not have known? Now, in history, we don't hear any more about this guy. In the Bible, apparently because I've done a little bit of research trying to figure out, did he become a follower after this? Did he become a believer? Did he tell people what had happened to him? I can't find anything. I would love to know the rest of the story, right? But I do know that one of the people at the courts that addressed Peter and said, aren't you with him? That she recognized him, actually was a relative of his. So she might have even had heard that story at that time and had gone to the court, kind of interested in what was going on with her relative. So those are the two miracles that happened there at the garden as Jesus is being arrested. I hope you found it interesting. I did. Tomorrow night, I am going to be talking about 10 things that the Pharisees did that were illegal. So they're trying Jesus for blasphemy, right? They're trying to find a reason, not only to just arrest him, but to actually kill him, right? And they themselves are breaking their own Jewish laws. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit next week. So bless you. Bless this week as we go about the Easter week. And may God just continue to open your ears and your heart to learn more about him there in this week and spend a little bit of time in his word. All right? Lord, I just ask that you just bless everyone in our community and in our world at large, Lord, as there's so many changes going on and there's so much healing that needs to take place. But above it all, Lord, I believe it is your will. You are in control, and we are going to try to be the best example of Christ that we can be to others during this time. In your name, amen. Bless you all.